Hello, I'm Mrs H. In today's tutorial, we're going to be sewing the Passport Folio, which is exactly what it sounds like. I love this pattern. Now I need to tell you that the fabrics that I use during the video were provided free of charge by a company called Sew Hot, that's www.sewhot.co.uk, for the purposes of filming this tutorial video. Okay, so I love this. I thought it was going to be bigger, but fortunately it's not too big. It's for the person who takes charge of the passports, the boarding passes, the insurance cards, the change, the documentation, everything that you need when you are going away, flying for a holiday or a work trip, business, whatever you need. So this is what you've got. I've stuffed mine full. There's no cash in it, unfortunately, which would probably make it a little bit chunkier, but there's plenty of space in there with what I've got in here and whatever you need to put in here. Closes with a cam snap, one single snap, which is super easy to install, and there's a zip. That's it for hardware. There is no other hardware at all in this pattern. So the flap opens and you've got space for 4 cards. 4 card slots in here for your insurance cards, your credit cards, whatever you need to take with you. And then you've got a zip pocket. And the wonderful thing about this zip pocket is not only have you got a zip pocket, but you've also got a slip pocket behind the zip pocket, which I think is quite handy just for anything else you need to take, any extra documentation. You've also got 4 passport slots. I've only actually got 3 passports though. And I did look at buying some dummy passports, but apparently that's illegal, so I didn't do that. So I've just put the 3 in that I've got, but basically you've got 2 passport slots on either side, and then behind the passport pockets you've got large pockets for your documents, boarding passes, whatever you need to take with you. Now they are nice and sturdy without the passports or with the passports. So you've got room for 4 passports, 2 sets of boarding passes, so you can fit all 4 in there if you need to. You've got room for your anything else documents or anything else that you need to take with you. You've got a zip pouch pocket for any coins or any cash that you want to take with you, and also your 4 card slots for your insurance cards or medical cards, credit cards, whatever you need to take. And then it all just folds up very nice and neat with this cam snap, so you can go from your ticket desk or your check-in desk through security, through to the boarding gate, and everything is there ready for you. I've used this beautiful Janet Clare fabric that, as I said, was gifted to me for the purposes of this video. I was given a choice of fabrics and I am so happy with the fabrics that I chose. They're absolutely gorgeous. I love them. I think that actually, if I'd looked a bit more carefully before, these are fabrics that I would have chosen myself. So this is the one that we're going to sew in the video. This is it's not a difficult pattern to make, but you do need to pay attention to the instructions and you do need to be fairly accurate. So everything in the video will talk you through how to sew this passport folio, take you through step by step. And this is the pattern, or this is the version that is in the pattern. I've just used plain solid colours so you can follow along and see exactly which piece is which. Okay, and I've tried to keep similar colours in the video so that you can follow along the pattern and the video, or the pattern and the video, without too much confusion. Hopefully there is a bit of engineering in this pattern just to reduce bulk, so it does require a little bit of patience and a little bit of brain power, but hopefully with the video you'll be fine. If you've got any questions or any problems, give us a shout, send us an email, drop us a Facebook message, anything like that. We're at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H or www.mrs-h.com. We'll pop the link, or we'll put the web address in the bottom of the video for you. But this one's exactly the same. You've got the 4 passport pockets and your 2 big boarding pass pockets there. You can see the features a little bit easier on this one because of the contrast stitching. You've got your 4 card slots here. You've got your zip pouch, which you can use as a zip pocket, and also a slip pocket behind there as well. Okay, so I think this is perfect for anybody who likes to be in charge of all of the documents and make sure that nothing gets lost. I hope you're going to sew along with me. Thank you for joining me, and happy sewing. Right, so let's run through your pattern pieces first, because I know that there is the opportunity of having a bit of confusion here with which piece goes with which piece. So let's run through your pattern pieces, your fabric interfacing, your stabilizers, etc. Okay, so we've got piece letter A, I guess piece letter A. We've got A, your folio exterior, so you should have one out of your main fabric, and I'm using the same colour fabrics as are in the pattern. Okay, they're not exactly the same fabrics because I want something with a bit of pattern on it, but I've used the same colourways to hopefully try and minimise confusion. So I've got mine main fabric in navy, so I've got one folio exterior and I've got my medium weight interfacing, and I've fused that on. That's a separate pattern piece. It's just 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimetres smaller on each side. So I fused that into place. I've also got a piece of Decaville Heavy or Decaville 1 using the separate pattern piece, but this is not fused on yet. Okay, we're not going to use that until the very end, so you can pop that to one side. Okay, then B are card slots. So this is very, very similar to the backing piece, but it is longer. So I've also done that out of the navy, and then I've got my interfacing. Now you'll notice the interfacing is quite a bit shorter. So line it up with the top, 1/2 inch from the edge on the top and the sides, and then you'll have all of this piece which is not interfaced. That doesn't need to be interfaced, don't worry about that. Okay, and then we need piece C. This is the folio interior. This is a rectangle. So you've got your main fabric. You can change these, you can alter which fabrics you use, as long as you don't get confused, which is why I'm using the same kind of fabrics, just to reduce confusion. So your folio interior, this is going to be the backing bit that we're going to pop our pockets onto. And that one is also interfaced, but again 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimetres smaller on each side. Then we've got our pocket pieces, our zip pocket pieces. Now this zip pocket is like a pouch with a slip pocket behind it. Okay, so we've got piece D1. There's 4 different Ds part of the zip pocket. So D1 is made out of your main fabric, and this is going to be, so when you open that zip pouch or that zip pocket, this is going to be on the inside front. Okay, so the front will actually look like it's got the passport pockets, but on the inside you'll have this piece here, and this is not interfaced. That doesn't need to be interfaced. You've also got pieces D2. You're going to cut 2 of these. These are your zip tabs. They also don't need to be interfaced. They're going to be on the ends of your zip. You've got piece D3, which is a joining strip. Now this is interfaced, and you'll find the measurements for the interfacing just underneath that instruction for D3, but basically it's 1/2 inch smaller on each side. And then finally for the pocket, you've got pieces D4, and you're going to cut 2 of these, and they are also not interfaced. So when you open your zip, you'll have the navy on the front inside, and you'll have this grey fabric on the other side, and that will also form a slip pocket behind the zip pocket. Okay, it'll all come clear as we're making this, but just in case you're watching this while you're cutting out, I thought it might be helpful to share with you where each piece goes. Okay, then we've also got piece D, middle pocket, and you should have 2 out of your main fabric and 2 out of your contrast fabric. Okay, so when you cut these out, you should have everything mirrored. Okay, so I've got 2 out of my main fabric, and I cut those right sides together. You can always cut one and then flip the pattern piece over and cut the other one. That's fine. Or you can cut them two together. So you should have two of those. We've also interfaced those, again, 1/2 inch smaller on all sides, 1.2 centimeters smaller on all sides. And I've attached my Decaville light onto there, okay? If you work in pairs, then this is a lot simpler and a lot easier. So if you can, do try and work in pairs. So you've got two of your main fabric middle pocket. They're both interfaced and both got Decaville, okay? Actually, I'll pop those to one side there so we've still got them. And then you should have two out of your contrast fabric, again, mirrored. So you've got two facing one way and two facing the other way, two pairs, okay? When we come to use these, we'll work in pairs again, just so we can keep things simple, but one of the pairs might swap with the other pair. Don't panic, okay? We'll talk it through as we get there. So that's your middle pocket D. And then pocket backing. This is F, again, mirrored. And we've got a pair. So I'm using my main navy fabric and I've got my interfacing, again, cut 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeters smaller, and that is fused on. There's no Decaville on this one, okay? It's just the fabric and the interfacing. And then piece piece G, sorry, this is the front pocket. Again, I've got a pair, okay? So this is out of my contrast fabric, my grey fabric. Looks slightly bluer to me, but hopefully it will be clear enough of a contrast from the other fabric. And then they're interfaced, and I've got another two of the Decaville pieces on there. Now, when you come to fuse the Decaville, what I like to do is fuse the Decaville firstly onto my front pockets and then work in pairs for my middle pockets, so that you know you've got three pairs. You've got a pair of front pockets and two pairs of the middle pocket, okay? And that pocket stabilizer, that's number H, letter H. H is not a number, it's letter H. Okay, and then I've also got a zip. I've got a really, really long zip because I didn't have a shorter navy zip in my stash, but don't panic, we'll cut that down to size later on. Right, you can pop all of these pieces to one side, and we're going to start with front pocket G. We're going to work in pairs again, okay? So get your front pocket G and then your main fabric middle pocket E. Okay, so these are our middle pockets. We're going to pop the two grey ones to one side, and we're just going to use the main fabrics for our middle pockets on this one, okay? Everything else can go to one side for the minute. Now, we are going to attach these to these, but we want to make sure that only one piece has got the Decaville, okay? So if I'm attaching to this end, which hasn't got the Decaville, I can't add that piece that has got the Decaville, so I'm going to need to add this piece that has got the Decaville. So we're going to swap pairs, okay? And then this one, that's got the Decaville, so I need to use this end that hasn't got the Decaville and match that one up. Okay, so I've got my main fabric with the Decaville at the bottom and my contrast fabric with the Decaville at the top. Okay, now everything should match up, so if it's not matching, try swapping the pairs. Actually, let's use clips. I don't want to go through my Decaville. So this is Decaville light on these ones, and that's piece H. Got some very wonderful random clips in this one, so I'll take the odd bits out. My nice selection. Okay, so all we're going to do is sew along these top and angled edges on this one, and we're going to use our regular seam allowance. which is 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre. I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. I'm going to use my regular stitch length. Okay, let's swap down to my regular stitch length. There we go. So I'm going to start at the side here and back stitch. Now I'm going to lift my presser foot with my needle down and pivot. I'm not quite there yet. Let's take one more stitch, lift my presser foot and pivot. Perfect. Okay, and we can keep sewing. And then just a little back stitch at the end. And I'm going to leave my threads long because I'm going to do a bit of top stitching on this pattern. And I want to know that my threads will be lovely and pretty. So there's one pair done. We'll do the other one. So I'm going to start from the other side on this one. And again, back stitch. And then carry on. Lovely. So far, so good. Okay, now we're going to trim a little bit of the seam allowance away here. So on this top pointy corner bit, just snip in from that corner right into the seam allowance there. Don't go through your stitches. You don't want to cut that far, okay? But just as close as you can without cutting through. So I've cut a line. And then I'm just cutting either side a little triangle to make this nice wide triangle here. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to fold this right sides out. And then we're going to top stitch. Make sure that corner's nicely pushed out. And this top seam is nicely pushed out. Give it a little finger roll. And I'm going to give that a little press. And get my tiny iron over here, my little pressing mat. I think I might need to replace this pressing mat. It's a little bit bent. It does the trick at the minute. Right, give it a little press. Pop that to one side to cool down for the minute, and we'll turn this one through. So if you sort of push from the corner, you tend to find that the corner comes out nice and neat without having to use a pokey tool. Give it a little finger roll. If you do need to use a tool to turn that out, then you can. Let me see if I've got my spoon. Yeah, I'm just going to use the end of my spoon. And out my favourite bag making tool at the moment is a little teaspoon. Okay, right, so give that a little press. A nice crisp finish. So these are going to be on the front of your passport pockets. So if you want them to look neat, then a nice crisp press is essential. Okay, then what we're going to do is top stitch this. So I'm going to increase my stitch length slightly, and I'm going to sew at 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge, just along these shaped edges and the top. Okay, so again, I'm working in my pairs, so just along there and along there and along there and along there. Okay, there's no need to back stitch on this one. I've left my thread tails long, so I'm going to tie mine off to keep them secure. Okay, so when you approach the top, just have a little check and then pivot so you can make sure you're nice and neat into the corner there. Okay, and then I'll do my second one. It's easier to work in pairs because then you know that everything's attached to the right bit. Okay, lovely. Right, so I'll just tie these ends off so they won't come unravelled while we're working with it. We will cross this seam with another seam anyway, but I just like to know that they're nice and secure and not coming unfixed anywhere. Okay, that's one half, and then we'll do the other half. Now we're going to need our other middle pockets in a second, and that will be our contrast ones with the grey. Okay, just tie that off, and I'll just tie this one off as well. Okay, there we go. Lovely, nice and neat. Okay, so now we've got our pairs. Okay, now we need our second middle pocket. These are the contrast ones, and again we're going to attach not Deckerville to Deckerville. Okay, so I wouldn't be able to pop those two together because that's got Deckerville and that's got Deckerville. So what I'm going to do is swap the pairs and attach this one, oh, on the right sides together, to this one. Okay, so I've got Deckerville on that side and no Deckerville on that side. Okay, so I'll match these up and then we can sew them. I think this is why it helps to work in pairs, because you've got the other one right there. You can just swap it and know that you've got the right piece. Okay, so this one, that doesn't match up. Let's turn it around. There we go, that matches. And my Deckerville is down the end. I can match this up to the other end. Pop a couple of clips on, and we're going to sew this the same way as we did our front pocket. Now, just got the pattern with me to make sure that I'm not telling you anything incorrect. You've got all the right information. Okay, so I'm going back down to my construction stitch length. I'm going to back stitch at the start. And pivot. And back stitch at the end. And then I'm going to do the same on this second piece. Start at the side and back stitch. And pivot. And back stitch at the end. Okay. There we go. Right, so where are we? Other end. All we're going to do now is, again, trim into the seam allowance. I'll do it on this side so that you can see it a little bit easier. So we're going to cut directly from the corner and then a triangle each side, just to reduce the bulk in that corner and help it sit nice and flat when we turn it out. So from the corner and a triangle each side. Okay, and then we're going to turn this right sides out. And give it a little finger roll. got a little pucker in there on my seam allowance. Smooth that out. Okay, and then we'll give this a little press. Just along that top edge there. And then we'll do the same to the other one, and then we'll have a look at what we've got going on. Don't worry too much at the moment. If it all looks like everything's all in a pickle, it's okay. Doesn't matter which side you press on. Okay, so we're going to top stitch this, but we are going to top stitch on the navy side this time, okay, because your pocket is going to look like this. This is the front pocket. Okay, so we'll top stitch same as we did before, so I'm increasing my stitch length slightly, and I'm using a 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge, or a back stitch then. I was going to say don't need to back stitch, but I did. And we'll do the same on this one, again on that navy end, or that main fabric end. Okay, trim those off. Turns out I did back stitch anyway. I think it's a habit. So never mind, I'll just trim the threads off. It shouldn't be seen too much because this is a nice navy fabric. Okay, right, so we've got, as pictured on the bottom of page 3, 2 pairs of pockets. Oh dear, I'm trying to lose that one. Okay, and they should mirror each other. Right, let's see what we're doing next. Okay, now we need to fold each set of pockets. Okay, so there should be about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters between the front pocket and the navy middle pocket, and about 1 3/8 of an inch or 3.5 centimeters between the navy one and the top one. So let's get my little ruler. Let's have a look. So we'll work on one and then the other for this one. Okay, so this is the unsewn end of that middle pocket, and I've got my decaville there. So we need to measure 1 3/8 of an inch or 3.5 centimeters from the top, and we're going to bring that middle pocket, that navy middle pocket or main fabric middle pocket, up to match, and give that a little finger press. If you want to, you can add a clip in the side there just to keep it in place until we press it. And then, oh, I've thought of a flaw to my plan. That's not going to work, is it? And then we need to measure 1 inch from the top of the main fabric middle pocket and bring this front pocket up to match, and smooth that down, give it a nice little finger press, and you can add a clip if you want for the minute. Okay, so everything should be nicely smoothed down. You should have 1 inch at the top and 1 3/4 inches at the very top of that one. Now your distances will be slightly different on the side, so don't panic about those, just work on the straight edges. Okay, let's bring my tiny iron back over, and I'm going to give it a little press on the bottom to start with so I can leave that clipped, and then I can unclip and work my way up. That just makes sure that all of those layers are nice and in place. You can press on the back for a little bit if you want. I think it's more risky pressing on the back, isn't it? Because you risk catching your interfacing. Okay. So once you're happy that that is square, so even out your layers on the sides to make sure it's nice and square. I'm just gonna clip that until we're ready to use it. So while we press the other one. Okay, so that can be popped to one side. So we're going to do the same on this one. So even though it's the other direction, we've got our unsewn end of the contrast middle pocket, and I'm going to measure down 1 3/8 of an inch from the top and line that up. Okay, that should, in theory, if it's all nice and square and you've cut out quite accurately, that should be nice and square on the sides as well. Okay, and then we're going to measure 1 inch down from the top of the main fabric middle pocket, fold this front pocket up to match and just even it out, smooth it all out so that it matches nicely. And clip these layers together. Okay, so we'll just smooth this out, make sure it all lines up on the edges. That's great. Give it a little press. And then take these clips away and give it a bit more of a press further up. I think they look great, those passport pockets together. They look really smart in these colours, so that's good. Okay. Right, let's clip this while I'm working with the first pocket. Sometimes I think things just need a minute just to set after you've pressed them or steamed them. So we'll leave that one to one side and we'll work back on this one. And you're going to need your pocket backing. So this should be in your main fabric and hopefully they should match. So again, I've got a pair of these. So if I turn it right sides together, that one's not going to fit on that one because that's the opposite. So this one must match to that set of pockets. And then this one should hopefully match to this set of pockets. So in theory, these will line up really nicely. And if you work on this side of the pockets, then you can see, and you can give things a little bit of a wiggle. I'm going to just add a couple of clips to hold it in place while I'm wiggling. Okay, that matches on all sides, apart from just the bottom there needs to be slightly longer. So I'll just stretch it out slightly. Doesn't matter if you're not 100% accurate on this. Doesn't matter too much. Okay, so now we are going to sew along the top, this top angle at the side and then down the side. Okay. Let's prepare the second pocket piece so that we can work in pairs again. So we'll put our pocket back in right sides up, pop this down on top just so that I can line it up nice and neat. Okay, this one's quite different. So let's double check my measurements. Okay, that wasn't quite right where I pressed it. So they both match now, which is good. You want them to both match because on your finished Passport Folio, they'll be side by side. Okay, and I'm clipping all around, even though you're not actually going to be sewing this long straight edge. Just holds it in place if you've had to have a little wiggle. Okay. Right, so we are going to be sewing along the top straight edge, the top angled edge, and down the short straight edge. We're going to leave this long straight edge and the bottoms unsewn. Okay, and we're going to sew using our regular seam allowance and our regular stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. Not quite. Just take an extra stitch to get to the right place if you need to. Okay, and we'll turn. Now if you want to, where these folds are, you can always do a little back stitch just to secure those. Okay, that's one set of pockets done. Let's do the other one. So for this one, I'll probably work up from the bottom on this straight side edge, the shorter one. At this angle. Trim those threads. Now we are again going to trim a bit of excess fabric from these. So same as we did before, we're going to cut straight into the point here and then a little triangle either side to make a deep V, and again on this side corner here. Okay, we'll go again on this one here. We should have some nice reduced bulk in these corners. It's quite nice sewing a nice holiday passport wallet, and I can hear the seagulls outside, which makes me feel like I'm at the seaside, which is nice. Okay, so all we're going to do now is turn these right sides out. No, we're not. We can turn the right sides out, but I'm actually going to reduce a little bit of the bulk on these before I do. So I'm just going to fold back that pocket backing piece and just trim the seam allowance for the pockets. Okay, just to reduce a bit of bulk. And I'll do the same on this one. Don't go too close to the seam, but just reduce a little bit out of there, or as much as you can, are you feeling comfortable about taking off. I think I could maybe do a little bit more on that one. Okay. Don't go too close to the seam. You don't want it to be a weak spot, but just taking a little bit is fine. Right, so now we can turn these right sides out. Again, point first. And you can just push out like those corners and the seams. I'm going to run my spoon along the inside edge of this seam as well, just to push that seam out and help it sit nice and neat. Okay, give that little finger roll, and then we're going to give that a press. So we want all of these edges to be nice and crisp, so make sure they're sitting how you want them to, and then give them a little press. along the top and the sides. See if I can roll this seam a little bit neater as well. Bit awkward ironing with my wrong hand, but that's just the way we are. That's fine. Okay, that looks lovely and neat. So I'm just going to add a couple of clips in, just hold everything in place because you want the sides and the bottom to match up. Okay, lovely. That can be popped to one side. And then we'll do the same on this second piece. I think it's much easier working in pairs rather than doing one bit and then having to go back and think, hang on a second, what have I just done? Okay. I'm just poking out these corners and rolling that top seam. My little iron doesn't stretch very far, so I've got to press on this side and then neaten this side seam up a little bit. I want a nice sharp edge to it, just because I'm very particular. You don't have to worry too much about making it a nice sharp seam. I'm just very fussy, I think. Okay. And then I think this is the one that wasn't quite long enough when we folded it and we've manipulated it, or we've given it a little wiggle. So just make sure that your bottom and your sides all line up and add a little clip just to hold those all in place nicely. I'll add another one on the top there just to be sure. Don't need that one. Right. Okay, so now we're going to do a bit of top stitching, and we're going to top stitch along the top straight edge, the top angled edge, and down this side that we've sewn. So everywhere that you've already sewn, we're going to top stitch, and we're going to use our slightly longer stitch length, and I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge. There's no need to back stitch, but if you would like to, you can. Apparently I do. It must be a comfort thing, I don't know. I'm going to go all the way to the top, along that angled bit, and then along the top straight edge. Once you're happy with that, increase your stitch length all the way, and we're going to baste these layers together on the right hand side. And you can take a slightly bigger seam allowance on this. I'm just going to do my usual 1/8 of an inch, 3 mil, just so I know it's definitely out of the seam allowance. And then along the bottom. And that just keeps all of those layers together while we are using it. Okay. So I'm going to do exactly the same on this one. So I'm going to change my stitch length back down to my top stitching stitch length and go along the top and the side, and then I'll baste around the open edges, the raw edges. Do you know what? Whilst I've still got my needle down, let's just pivot and I'll baste from here. That's easier, isn't it? Another one stitch and then up this raw edge. Right, there we go. So we have got 2 matching passport pocket sections, and they should all be lovely and lined up because everything was done together and they match and they were mirrored. All good. Okay, now you need to retrieve your folio interior, which is piece C. Okay, which is the rectangle. Now pay attention to which way this should be. So go back to your cutting out list, and this will tell you it should be 10 inches wide. Okay, so make sure that you've got it. Yeah, so that's 10 inches wide. And then we're going to pop these on top, matching up side and bottom edges. Okay, well, I've got a little extra bit of fabric poking out there. Let's just give that a little trim so that it all matches. Okay, so I'm just going to pop a few clips on there to hold those in place. So these are both right sides up. So your folio interior is right sides up and your pocket pieces are also right side up. Make sure that's all nice and square. Okay, lovely. So we've got, oh dear, not very well done. So we've got our interfacing on the back of this folio interior, and then on the front we've got our pocket pieces, our passport pocket pieces. Let's have a little look at how far there should be in between them. That is around about 1 1/8 of an inch. 1 1/8 of an inch. Let me see if I've got a tape measure. I can work out the metric for you on that. I don't have that apparently. Apparently that's what I'm missing, is a tape measure. No, I'm lying. It's in my sewing case. Right, let's have a look. 1 1/8 of an inch is just under 3 centimeters. It's sort of 2.8 centimeters, that is. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to base this into place along the sides and bottom edges. Okay, so within the seam allowance, so using your 1/4 inch 6mm seam allowance, base that into place along the sides and the bottom. And when you come to this bit in the middle, you might want to just do a little back stitch over there, just for a bit of extra added security. And again, as we go on to the second pocket piece. Okay, lovely. So that is basted into place. This is going to be the bulk of our inside of our passport wallet then, and that is done, ready to go. Okay, so in the next section we are going to be constructing the zip pocket. Okay, so pop these to one side and don't pop them to one side because we're going to use them again, but just retrieve your zip pocket pieces D1, D2, D3 and D4 because we're going to use them next. Okay, so first thing we're going to use is D3, our joining strip, and we're going to place it right sides down on top of the right raw edge of our folio interior pockets attached. Okay, turn this around to face me so that I can work out my left and right. I have enough trouble at the best of times, let alone when it's away from me. Okay, so it's going on to this end, so I'm going to line up these side edges. Okay, I'm just going to clip it into place just to hold it for the minute. Okay, and then I'm going to sew this into place and just take note of the seam allowance on this, on the pattern. And I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. I'm using my regular stitch length. Okay, lovely. And then I'm also going to grade this seam allowance here. So pull your joining strip away and you can give the other seam allowances a nice trim just to reduce the bulk here. Okay, and what we're going to do is fold this back over. You can give that a little press. I'm just going to add a pin into here, I think, just to keep these pockets from flapping around like a flappy pocket while I'm trying to sew. Maybe just at the top will help. Let's see. Yeah, that's great. So just one pin is enough actually for that. Okay. Right, so let's give this a little press away from the passport pockets. That'll help it sit nice and neat. So seam allowances are pressed towards the joining strip. So all I've done literally is just fold it back over itself and give it a little press. Okay. And then we are going to top stitch. Okay, so we're going to top stitch. See, it's a good job I've got the pattern next to me, otherwise I'd tell you something wrong then. So I'm going to change up to my top stitch in stitch length and I'm going to top stitch on the joining strip side 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I might have that wrong, let me check. I do have that wrong. I'm going to top stitch either side. Okay, if you're not confident that you can do it either side, then just top stitch on the pocket piece side. Okay. Okay, and I'll go down the other side. Okay, so not only will that keep your seam allowance is in place, but it will also mean that your passport pockets are not so big that your passports fall out. So we need a little bit of extra allowance on this side, but I didn't want to provide you with two different sets of pattern pieces because that just gets really confusing. So we'll just take the extra out by top stitching that side. Okay. So basically we're going to form a zip pouch, and this is going to form one piece of the outside of the zip pouch, which is why the other pieces you've only got 3 pieces of fabric to form the rest of the pouch. Okay, so we can pop all of those to one side for the minute. We're going to need our pieces D2, which are our zip tabs. I'm going to work on the wrong side. Let's just double check they're on the wrong side. See what I've got that I can use that will show up for you. Let's try this. So we need to fold over by 1/2 inch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is draw a line 1 inch away from the end. And then fold that end in to meet that line, and that will be 1/2 inch then. I'm going to do this on all 4 ends. And then we can press them with my tiny iron, which I think works pretty well actually for this exact purpose. It's fine, isn't it? Okay. Right. So let's bring my little pressing mat over. We're just going to fold each end in by 1/2 inch to that line. Give it a little press. And then I'm going to work on this other one, give that time to cool down for a minute. Fold in by 1/2 inch to that line and press. And then on the other end, fold it in by 1/2 inch and give it a little press. If you're used to working on bigger bags, it probably feels a little bit odd to not be adding interfacing into certain pieces, but on this one the main aim is to reduce bulk, make it a bit easier to sew and give it a nice neat finish. So we've omitted interfacing where it's not actually needed. Okay. Right, so once you've got your 1/2 inch ends folded in, then we're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, and give it a little press along the centre line there. And then again on this one. And little press, lovely. Leave them a minute to cool down. Now we need to retrieve our zip, and it's inevitable that your zip is going to have a bit of tape on either end that we need to cut off. So we need the teeth only, and we need the teeth to measure 7 inches exactly. So I've cut the metal stopper off the end there and basted across the end. So now I'll measure to 7 inches. And oh, hang on, let's give it a little steam press before I do, just in case it's going to shrink. Give it a little steam. Better to shrink beforehand than after, isn't it? Okay, so let's measure this then to 7 inches long, is around about there-ish. And draw that with my chalk. That is, if you're working in metric, 17.75 centimetres long. 17.75 centimetres long. Okay, so make sure your pull is within that 7 inches, and then we'll trim the excess tape off. Okay, now I am going to just see if I can baste those two edges together so they stay together while we're working with this zip. There's nothing worse than a bit of zip flinging around wildly. Just sewing back and forth over the teeth very, very gently, just to hold those two sides together. Lovely. Right, what we're going to do then is open out these zip ends, these, what are they, D2 pieces they are. Now I'm using some fast and tacky glue because my double-sided tape has somehow lost its stickiness. I think because the studio is such a damp place that it's lost all of its stick. So this is nothing that I've had to actually properly hand baste another bag I'm working on. Right, so I'm just adding a little bit of glue into each tab, and use double-sided tape if you've got it. This is a bit of a faff to use, a bit of a pain, but it does dry clear fortunately. And then all we're going to do is pop the end of the zip level with the folded over end of the zip tab, and then fold this over along that center line, and then my phone alarm's going off there, sorry, very sorry. Okay, press that into place. So in theory that should be equal on both the front and the back. Okay, and then we're going to top stitch across that 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. If you can get closer with it still being neat, then that is also great. Okay, I'm happy with that. That looks nice and neat. Okay, we'll be crossing this with another seam, and then we're going to do exactly the same on this second end. So pop that in, make sure the edges are nicely lined up with this open end of the zip. Make sure that the side edges of the zip are level with the edges of the zip end, and then fold over and press that into place. Just make sure that that's even. Lovely. And then we'll sew that same as we did before. The key to this one is just take your time and sew as slowly as you need to for a nice neat zip end. Okay. Oh dear, I've got a loose thread going on here. It's caught in under my stitching. There we go. I'm going to trim these threads so they're nice and neat and not going to pop up later on. Okay, and that's our zip prepared. Now the next thing we need to do is retrieve our folio interior with pockets and joining strip attached, and then we're going to pop this zip right side down on top, matching up all of the raw edges. Now again, if you've got tape, then do use your tape. Okay, I'm gonna have to use clips, I think. The joys of a damp studio. We are having a new roof though, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully my future tape won't have so many issues and go unsticky. Right, so I'm going to baste this into place using a scant 1/4 inch. That's about a 5mm ish seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top and use my regular construction stitch length. And I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. If you prefer to use a zip foot, then you probably want to swap to a zip foot before sewing this. Okay, and as you come to the zip pull, just lift your presser foot, leave your needle down, lift your presser foot. Move the pull out of the way, and then press the foot back down and carry on sewing. Okay. Right, so where we are so far, we've got our zip attached to the joining strip, attached to the folio interior with pockets attached. Okay, fold that back over so we've got the wrong side facing up. Now this bit can be a bit tricky, So pay attention to which bit is which, okay? So we want a front inside D1. So that is one piece. So that's the one piece we've got. We've got two matching pieces, which are slightly wider or slightly higher. And we've got the one piece on its own. So get the one piece on its own, okay? And then we're gonna place this right sides down on top of the zip, matching all of these raw edges. Okay, so your zip is sandwiched in between. I'm gonna use my clips again. I do miss my tape, I must say. You forget what life was like before you had tape. Okay, so let's have a little look at what we've got. This is my wrong side of my D1, front inside, and then we've got the zip right sides down, and that is sandwiched in between those layers there. Okay, I'm going to sew this into place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, if you can. You might need to change your foot. Right, now as I'm approaching that zip pull, stop with my needle down, lift my presser foot, and just wiggle that zip pull out of the way. Okay. Then carry on to the end, and a bit of back stitching just to be sure that it's not coming undone anywhere along the line. Trim these little threads off. Okay, now we're going to fold this back along with the zip. Okay, so on the wrong side, on the back here, you've got that D1 front inside, and that should go over, just over the center of that bit between the two passport pockets. Okay, it should be that wide. And then on the right hand side, it looks like we've just got our pockets, joining strip and zip. Okay, so we'll give that a little press to make sure that that all sits nice and neat where we want it to. Just along that edge. And again on the back. Make sure that that sits away from the zip teeth there by pulling that back into place. Just do this top bit. Okay. Right, so once you're sure that that is nice and taut, in fact, I'm actually just going to add a little pin in there to keep that pulled right back. I don't want to risk having any extra fabric tucked up behind the zip teeth there. Otherwise it's going to be a bit awkward trying to open and close it. And then on the right side, that's nice and neat. Great. So we're just going to sew on the joining strip side 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge of this seam with the zip. Okay, and that's just going to hold everything in place. Okay, so pull that back slightly as you start sewing. It will just keep it nice and taut. And I'm going to back stitch just because that's what I like to do, apparently. Okay, and as I'm approaching the zip pull, I'm just going to pull it out of the way. And there we go. Lovely. So now we've got half of a zip pouch, but we need the other half as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is retrieve the last 2 pocket pieces, And let me tell you what letter these are. These are D4. Okay, so I'm going to have one piece right sides up and pop the zip on top of that. Wonder how I can do. I'm acting like this is directional fabric. It's not directional at all, is it? Okay, so line up the very edge of that piece there, and I would tape that into place if I had some tape. And I'm going to baste that into place along this raw edge, so I'll just add a couple of clips to hold it in place for the minute. Okay, so we're going to baste it into place again using a really narrow seam allowance, literally just to hold it in place while we're working with this bit. Okay, I'm not even going to bother changing my stitch length. I'm just going to straight down the side there. Okay, and then close that zip up again. Just move the zip pull out the way. Move that before I lose it off the end of the table. You can tell I've done that before. Okay, so that's on the wrong side, so you can sort of see the inside of the pouch there. Okay, and then on this side we're just going to add this last final piece of D4 pocket backing on top, right sides down. We're going to sandwich everything, that zip, in between the layers there. So again, lining up the raw edges, and if you've got tape then use tape. I haven't, so I'm playing it risky with my clips today. Okay, and I'm just making sure that's nicely lined up along the edge of the zip, and we're going to sew this into place using our regular, well, it's not our regular, is it? It's our 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance. Okay, so let's hop down to my construction stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. Go all the way to the end, back stitch again, and then I'll show you what this looks like. So if you couldn't picture how it was going to look in the end, then I'll show you now. So you've got this piece, so we're going to fold that piece back. That will form the slip pocket behind, and then on the back there we've got these two pieces. So it's like making a zip pouch in that we've got the lining pieces here and the exterior pieces here. Okay, now we are going to top stitch this, but before we do, I'll just show you where we're going with this. So these two pieces here will also fold to the back. Okay, so on the back we'll have two pieces right sides together, one main, one contrast, and one piece sort of right sides out. And then when you finish your construction, you'll see that you not only have you got the zip pouch in there, but you've also got a slip pocket behind. Okay, so first things first, I should have left this clipped probably, shouldn't I? Keep it out of the way. Let's clip that out of the way, just to stop it flapping around. So first thing we're going to do is give this a nice little press, and then we are going to top stitch that to hold it in place away from the zip teeth. Come a bit closer to my tiny iron. I don't know if that's probably its name. Is that its name, Tiny Iron? I don't know if that's how they market it, but that is apparently its name now. in my studio. Tiny iron. It's probably a travel iron, isn't it? Yeah. I forgot I had it, honestly. I bought it to go away to a retreat in 2020. And then, of course, I didn't use it for ages afterwards, so I forgot I had it. Right, so on this side, I'm just smoothing these layers back away from the zip teeth so they don't get caught. And if you need to move your zip pull out the way, you can. There we go. Okay, so with everything flat, we're going to top stitch along this second side of the zip, 1/8 of an inch away, or 3mm away from the folded edge of that seam. Okay, just move my zip pull out the way. Lovely. Right. Oh, I'm very pleased with that. I think that looks lovely. Right, so now we're going to fold this zip pocket so the zip is directly on the fold. Okay, so fold that so that those seams match up and you've got the zip tab folded in half nicely. And we'll give that a little clip, and the same on this end as well. Okay, if you do the ends first, then you find that the rest of it falls into place nicely. What have I done here? I said that and then it didn't happen, did it? So I'm just going to smooth all of these layers out and clip them into place there, and then look again at this. Why does that not sit nicely? There we go. Just needed smoothing out. Okay, so we can clip those layers and hold them back there. So that will form our zip pocket, pouchy slip pocket part of our passport folio. Right, okay, so now what we want to do is baste along the top and the bottom within the seam allowances, and that is just to keep all of these layers together. Don't worry about the fact that this is open and not sewn yet, okay? That will get closed up later on. Okay. So we're going to sew within the seam allowance, and you can baste. So I've increased my stitch length and I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. And I'm just going as far as I need to make sure that I've caught all of those layers in place. And that's all being held in place ready for the final construction. On this one, I'm going to turn it over. I think it's slightly neater to sew from the zip end of the seam, so I've turned it over so I can do that again. Okay, and we trim these extra threads because they'll pop out later on after we finish construction and surprise us. Right, so that's our zip pocket, pouch, slip pockets constructed. So don't worry too much about this open section. We'll close that up later on. Okay, so you can pop this to one side. We're going to work on the card slots next, but it is starting to come together, isn't it? Looks great so far. Right, so let's get started on our card slots. So you're going to want your card slot piece of fabric, that's B, and you've got your interfacing attached. And as we talked about earlier, the interfacing is quite a bit short, but that's okay, that's how it's supposed to be. Right, so on the wrong side, we are going to draw two lines and we're going to place them 8 3/8 of an inch, or 21.25 centimeters away from the short straight edge and 12.5 inches away. So I'm just going to draw a bit of the lines to start with at the right distances, and then I'll turn it and draw the line the whole way along the width of the piece. Okay. You can use whatever you want for this, as long as it doesn't show through to the right side of your fabric. And then what we're going to do is we are going to turn it right side up, and we're going to fold right sides together along those two lines. So that's the first line, and we're going to press that into place. So right sides together, fold along each line and give it a little press. Okay. I switched my iron off for a minute there, so it's taken a minute to warm up again. Okay, and then we open that out and fold and press along the second line that we've got. Okay, again, right sides together. Okay. After that, you can open it out again. And then on the right side, okay, so we've got our two lines that we've pressed on the wrong side, and then on the right side we're going to draw a line 1.5 inches to the right of each crease. So turn your piece around so the angled flappy bit is on the right for you, and we're going to draw a line 1.5 inches either side. Do you know, I cannot see my crease marks at all on this fabric once I've got my ruler on, so I'm going to add a pin in to the top and the bottom, just so I can identify where these creases are, the top and the bottom. Okay. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to draw a line 1.5 inches to the right of those creases, so towards the flap end. Make sure you use something for this one that you can remove, okay, because this is on the right side and it will be seen. You want to be able to remove that. Okay, so now we're going to fold these wrong sides together along these two lines, so you can feel free to fold that up again, and then we're going to fold along the lines that we've just drawn to make a sort of a concertina. Okay, so we're folding those wrong sides together, so that's the original crease, and then we're folding along that line wrong sides together. I do that with it in front of me so I can make sure that that's nice and neat. Okay, and then you can give that a little press. In case you were wondering, in that little pause, I've just moved the cable for my tiny iron, so hopefully got a bit more of a run on it. Okay, and then we can do the same on this second one, so you might as well fold it along that original crease, the same as we did before, and then fold it back along that line on the right side there, and that will form a little concertina. So I'll give this a little press, and then I'll open it out and show you how it should be. Just give it a little press all the way along. I think maybe a flat pressing board would help rather than a curved pressing board where it has got a bit distorted. Something to look for next time. Right, okay, so what we've got now is a sort of a concertina piece, okay? So these pieces that are the valleys in that concertina are the lines that you've drawn on the wrong side, and these peaks are the lines that you've drawn on the right side, 1.5 inch to the right of the valleys, okay? So with these folded still, we're going to top stitch along the peaks, I suppose you could call them. And I'm using my top stitch stitching length, and I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same for the second peak as well. Exactly the same. And this will give you your 4 card slots. Okay, lovely. There we go. Okay. So once you've top stitched along each folded edge, like so, I can probably take these pins out now because we know that my folds are in the right place. I've top stitched them now. So then we can fold it back up again along those creases, and we're just going to baste in the seam allowance on both sides just to keep these pleats in place while we work on construction. Okay, so I'm just clipped along the edges. So I'm just gonna stitch them. Let's just double check the measurements before I baste. So the panel should be 11 5/8 of an inch or 29.5 centimeters long. That looks okay. Let's just double check on my actual ruler. So from the point, that looks pretty good. Okay, great. So I'm just going to backstitch, not backstitch, sorry, baste along these edges to keep these pleats folded up nicely. And I'll do the other side, purely to keep everything in place while we are working with it, that's all. Okay, lovely. Looking great so far. Now we need to find the centre of the panel, if you haven't already. So I fold it in half. Find the center point there, and I am going to mark that with a pin. Okay, and I better mark the center of this end as well, just so I can make sure that everything is nice and straight and nicely squared. Okay. So we're going to draw a line 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre either side of the centre. Let me turn it around, or I'll turn it this way, and then it's facing the right way to you, and it matches the pattern. So we're going to draw the line 3/8 of an inch either side, or 1 centimetre either side, and we're going to top stitch from the point here, from the flap, along each line, across the top of the card slots, and we're going to extend to 1/8 of an inch or 3mm past the card slots, going to stop and pivot, sew along the top there, and then back down the second line. So we'll end up with a little bit of a rectangle on our panel. Right, if I'm going to do this, I really should make sure that my ruler is nice and straight and parallel. Okay, so there's my line. You have got a few layers to contend with here. Okay, so just make sure that everything's lined up nicely along the bottom of your panel with your ruler. I'm just going to draw my line. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it around. And so because it's going to go to 3/8 of an inch the other side of the centre, that will actually be 3/4 of an inch all together. Okay, so when you're drawing this second line, 3/8 of an inch past your centre, that should be a total of 3/4 of an inch between the two lines. So that is 1 centimetre either side. So that's 2 centimetres in total between the width of them. So we're going to sew from this pointy end. We're going to sew from here. Now I would hold on to your thread tails while you're doing this so it doesn't get chewed up in this bit, because there's no interface in there at all in this point. So we're going to sew up to the top and over by 1/8 of an inch or 3mm over the card slots, pivot, sew across the top, and then back down again. Okay, I'm using my top stitching stitch length just so that it matches my other bits of decorative stitching. Okay, I'm going to start my needle down and I'm holding on to my thread tails. Okay, and then I'm pivoting and sewing across the top. As far as that second line, and pivoting and sewing back down that line. Okay, and because there's no interfacing in there and I don't want the end to get chewed up, I'm just going to leave my thread tails long on both of those and tie them off rather than back stitching, just so we can keep this panel nice and flat and not kind of ruckled. I don't know whether ruckled's an actual word. We say it in our household, so if it's not an actual word, sorry. It's our actual word. Right. Okay. I'll just tie this second one another time just to be sure that it's nice and secure. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to draw a line 5 5/8 of an inch or 14.25 centimetres from this straight edge. So I'm turning the panel just so I can see it a little bit easier. 5 5/8 of an inch away, and this is going to indicate where to line up our zip pouch. Okay, so just draw yourself a little line. Let me flip over. I don't want to miss anything out of this one because the engineering is key on this pattern. So I'm just following along to make sure that I don't miss anything. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pop our folio interior with our passport pockets and zip pockets. We're going to pop that on top, lining up the edge of the zip, so where we folded over those zip tabs. So I'm going to line that up with the line we've just drawn on the card slots. Okay, so let's have a look at where we are. That's just about 1 1/8 inches away, oh dear, away from the top of the card slots. Okay, and I'm just going to flip this around to make sure that I'm actually getting this on straight. I want the edges to line up square on the top and the bottom here. Okay. There we go, lovely. Right, so let's clip that into place, and then I'll show you what it looks like on the wrong side. Just so that you can check that yours is also the same. Okay, so we are gonna baste along each long edge to make sure that these stay together. So this is what it looks like on the back. So on the back, our card slots panel comes not quite as far as our zip pocket pieces. Okay, now the reason that they don't all match is just to offset the bulk of the fabric and where they end. Okay, so you haven't done anything wrong, that's how it is. Right, so let's turn back over to this right side. We're just going to baste in place along these side edges to hold these two panels together, and then that's the inside of our Passport Folio completed. Nearly. More or less ish. Okay, so that's one side done, and then we'll do the second side. So I'm just basting in the seam allowances, and I am back stitching just for a bit of extra security that nothing's going to move. Okay. Now, I like to move my zip pull into the centre so that I know that any bulk is kept well away from these seams that we're going to complete later. Now, once you've sewn that on, you'll be able to see how your zip pouch is formed, and also you've got this slip pocket behind, but you'll notice that you can still put your hand all the way through the slip pouch behind, which is no good at all. So let's close that up. What we're going to do is draw a line directly in the center of these two passport pocket pieces. Okay, so find the center and then top stitch. We're going to go through all of these layers from the bottom to the top, keeping everything nice and flat underneath. But use my ruler for this. Okay, it's very hard picking up a flat ruler from a flat floor sometimes, isn't it? Right, so that measures 1 inch and 1/8 of an inch. So that's nice and easy, isn't it, to find the center? So it's going to be halfway between 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch. This is where metric is so much easier because it works in smaller increments, but that's okay. What we'll do is we'll fold these, let's fold them wrong sides together actually, and line up these passport pockets, and I can just pop a pin in there and that will give us the center. Okay, and then I'm just going to draw a line, a nice squarish kind of line, you know, nice straight line. Make sure that everything's nice and level, and just make sure that that line looks straight next to my pockets, because it might be straight, but if it doesn't look straight, then it will look wonky. My goodness, I think that's the most profound thing I've said all day. Okay, so we're going to stitch from the bottom to the top along that line. Not only will this help your folio to fold nicely, but it'll also keep all of those layers together and close the bottom of the pockets. So just make sure everything's nice and flat behind itself, all lovely. We'll start at the bottom and sew all the way up to the top along that line. Okay, great. So my chalk will come out once I wet it. Don't panic too much about that being left. Right, that is the inside of our Passport Folio done. The only thing that's left to do now is add it to the exterior, which is what we'll do next. So grab hold of your folio exterior, piece A, and we're going to attach the two together now. Right, so what you need next is your folio exterior and also your cam snap. So you should have two pointy prongy bits, one male half and one female half. Doesn't matter if you put the wrong half into the wrong side, but I have put instructions in the pattern on which one to put in. That's okay. If not, you'll need your setter and an awl, and also I like to use either a little dab of glue or a bit of fray check, just to know that that's not going to go anywhere once it's set. All right, I'm just going to give my fabric a little bit of a press. It's got a bit of a crease in it from sitting waiting impatiently. I think it's impatiently, isn't it? We'll give it a bit of a press. Okay. So now we're going to measure from the, I'll do it on the wrong side so that you can see what I'm doing. So we're going to find the centre of the panel lengthwise, and let's do that. Let's mark that with a pencil on the wrong side. And then I'm also going to find the centre at the pointy end as well, in the hopes that my stitching and my snap might both be centered. That may be too much to ask, judging on past history, but it's nice to have a dream. Right, so we're going to measure from this short straight end, and we are going to measure, let's see, 4¼ inches or 10.75 centimeters from the short straight edge. So and I'm going to measure along the centre so that my snap is nicely centred. So 4¼ along the centre, and I'm going to mark a little dot there. Now, cam snaps have got such tiny little ends to their prongs that you can get away with just using a regular awl for this. You don't need a hole punch. And in fact, a hole punch would maybe cause a hole that's too bigger than you want. So just pop your awl through on your dot, give it a little bit of a wriggle, a wiggle, and then I'm adding a little dab of glue there. Now just stop those fibres expanding any further. Now, on this one, it tells you in the pattern, but you're going to insert the female half, so that's the one with the inny bit, and you're going to pop it with the rounded back on the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, so I'm going to pop that prong through from the back in through that hole, push it down so it's nice and all the way to the back, and then I can pop my female half on and then try and really hard not to lose anything. I'm going to set that. I do have a separate video on setting cam snaps if you need that. Okay, so the main key on this one is to make sure that the rounded back is nicely nestled into the anvil on the bottom of the setter, and just give it a little squeeze, and that is set. Although that's set really nicely, I'm just going to give it another little squeeze because we've only got a single layer of fabric here, and I want to be sure that that is nicely secure. Okay, lovely. If you've got snaps with or pliers with quite a long throat space, then actually you could choose to insert that at the end through your turning gap after you've added your decaville, which will make it stronger. But my throat space is really tiny on these, so that makes it very difficult to do. Right, pop the other half of your snap to one side. Right, I'm going to pop it on my ironing board at the side of me so I don't lose that, because we'll insert that later. We're going to insert that through all the layers. So with your folio exterior right sides up, grab hold of your folio interior. That's got your card slots, your passport pockets, your zip and slip pockets. Yes, I have closed that gap now on there. And we're going to pop this right sides together, so face down on top of the folio exterior. Actually, I'm just going to take these pins out because I can see me catching myself on those, and we don't need them anymore. Nothing's going to flop around wildly. Okay, so I'm going to start from the flap end, and I'm just going to make sure that everything is lined up really nice and neat before we work on the straight bit. So as long as the side edges on this flap are nice and even and the point is nice and even, then we should be okay. But just to be sure, I'll do my flap ends first, and then I can just even out this sort of rectangular body bit, and just make sure that your card slots and your passport pockets and everything is all nicely smoothed out. Nothing's pulling where it shouldn't be pulling. It's all even. Okay, and you can pin or clip all the way around. That should match up pretty well together. If you find that it's not matching up, then you may need to have a bit of a revisit to your card slots, and where we put the rest of the folio interior on top of the card slots, you may need to adjust that to make this the right length. Okay, try not to trim anything off of the folio interior if you can get away with it, because you risk your cards or your passports not fitting. Okay, but you can adjust the length of it just depending on where you place the folio interior on top of the card slots. Okay, right, so I've clipped all the way round, but we are going to leave a turning gap. Okay, we're going to leave a turning gap along the top edge. So have a feel for where your passport pockets are, and my passport pockets are here. So we're going to leave a turning gap along the top here. Let's think where we are. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to leave my turning gap there, and I've left a bit of a space in my clips to remind me to do so. Okay, I'm going to baste across that turning gap because that's what I like to do. So the rest of it I'm going to sew on my usual stitch length. I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. I'm going to back stitch and then sew to the corner, stop with my needle down and lift my presser foot and pivot. Sew to this corner, do the same, sew around, all the way around to the start of the turning gap, and then I'm going to back stitch using my regular stitch length. Then I'm going to increase my stitch length to the longest stitch length that I've got and baste across this turning gap. If you've already got a line of back stitching or a little bit of back stitching here anyway, then that's okay. If not, then you need to add a bit of back stitching here at your regular stitch length. After we finish that, what we'll do is we'll steam these stitches and remove them, turn the folio through, and then that'll give us a nice neat stitch line to follow for when we close the turning gap. Okay, so let's get started. I'm using my regular seam allowance for this and my regular stitch length, and I'm going to start with my back stitches. Hang on, I've got too many tools here. Remove some of my tools out of the way. Okay, now I'm increasing to my basting stitch, my longest stitch. And just sew into the end there. Okay. Now one thing I am going to double check is my seam allowance went a little bit off on this side. Let's just trim these extra bits down and see what we've got. I don't want my basting stitches to show on the right side. Okay, that looks fine. That's fine. My stitches are inside the seam allowance. Great. Okay. Right, before we do anything, let's reduce some of this bulk. Now, make a note of where your turning gap is to start with, okay? So we don't want to be cutting anything out of that seam allowance. So it's there. Let's mark that with a clip, and there. Okay, so that's where my areas of back stitching are. Now we're going to clip the corners. Actually, there's a lot of lines of stitching on that side, so let's work on this side. I'm going to clip the corners, and then I'm going to go in again for a bit more of a closer clip, just to reduce the bulk out of those corners. And we'll do the same on this corner. Clip straight across and then a bit more into the seam allowance. And then on these corners here, I'm just going to go in and take as much of this bulk of these corners away without compromising those seams, okay? So we're still going to go and do a final top stitch. So don't worry too much that there's nothing much holding these corners, because you will have your top stitch in there. Right, now in this curve, I suppose you call it, of the flappy bit, just going to cut some triangles or some notches into the seam allowance. Okay, and this will just help it sit nice and straight. We'll get a nice neat curve then, hopefully, and it will sit nice and flat once we turn it out. I'm just going to go a bit further with that. Never hurts to have a neater finish, does it? So a little bit of extra time here does help. Okay, now we've got lots of really annoying little triangles of fabric everywhere. That's how we should be. Right, so let's steam our turning gap, and then we're going to go ahead and reduce a bit more bulk on these seams as well, ready for when we turn it through. Bit of steam. bit of heat, bit of steam, lovely. And that just helps those stitch holes to really set in place. So when we come to remove those stitches, actually we are left with a nice line of stitch holes to follow. Okay, so we need to reduce a bit of bulk in these seams. It's up to you. Now that's where our turning gap is. Let's take those stitches out so that we've got our turning gap revealed. That's where we're going to turn through, and then we're going to grade our seam allowances, or just take a bit of extra bulk out of our seam allowances, so a bit of extra fabric, take it out. Lovely. Okay, so that's our turning gap open, ready for us to turn through in a few minutes. Take that extra stitching out. There we go, lovely. Okay, and then I recommend working on this wrong side, and where you can feel that you've got a bit of extra bulk, maybe at the start here where you've got your zip tabs, just snip a little bit of extra fabric out of that seam allowance. Okay, don't go mad, don't take too much out, just a little bit, every little helps. And then in this side I can feel I've got a bit of bulk there where the zip tabs are in the seam allowance. Let's take a bit of that out, and I could go a bit further with this one actually, because there's quite a bit of bulk here with the zip pockets and things. Not zip pockets, the passport pockets, sorry. I can take a bit of that out of the seam allowance and reduce the bulk there. That's quite nice to be able to do that. And not much bulk this end. Oh yeah, there's a little bit more there, so let's take a bit of that out. So I'm just folding back the layers, the top and the bottom layers, and snipping away the extra seam allowance of the layers in between those two, just to reduce down that thickness. Okay, that's great. Now maybe in this short end there's a bit of extra bulk in there because you've got the passport pockets in there. So if you want to cut this extra bulk away, you can. I'm going to, because it just gives you a much neater finish. Okay, right, I think that's all the extra bulk out of these seam allowances that I'm willing to take out. I don't really want to take any extra out of these card seam allowances, and this is of course our turning gap. So I think that's all the extra bulk gone. Just get rid of any little triangles or threads or bits and pieces, and then we're going to turn this through that turning gap, which I've lost again. There we go. Okay, so reach through and you'll find yourself in the passport pocket. That's fine. So reach through and just grab hold of that flap and pull it out, and just gently, gently, gently tug everything out. Just gently, it will come out. Just take your time. That's it. Okay. So don't panic that everything's flooping around wildly at the moment. Don't worry, we'll get it all in place. So we need to push out the curve of this flap. Get that seam nicely pushed out. Push out your side seams and your corners and this top corner. I'm going to get my favourite tool, my spoon. And I would recommend, if you don't have a spoon, a sewing spoon, that you invest in one. Okay, and then poke out these corners so that's nice and neat, and this corner of the flap, don't push too hard because you don't want that to come through your fabric. This top corner as well. Okay, So what you can do now is just give things a nice little finger roll to make sure that they are nice and where they should be. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a gentle press. I'm gonna start with a flap because that's probably what's going to be noticed most if you haven't got that nice and flat. So just give it a nice little press all the way around. There we go. Lovely. Okay, then let's have a look at this bottom edge. So this needs a bit of rolling to get the seam in place. That's okay, make sure everything's nice and flat, and I'm just going to give this bottom edge there a little press. Take your time doing this because this is something that will make a difference. Okay, once you've given that a little press, then I would just clip it into place. Okay, and let's do this bottom edge of this second set of pockets. Okay, we are on the home straight now. We're nearly there, nearly ready for a holiday to take this Passport Folio for a test. Okay, right, that's nice and even. That's pulling in slightly, so I'm just going to pop a clip in to keep that in place where it should be. Let's work on this end next. So just give it a nice little gentle roll and a little press along this straight edge as well. Okay, now don't forget we've still got our heavy stabilizer to add into here, our Decaville, so we're just pressing this at the moment just to almost train it to be the right size and shape to receive that Decaville. Okay, lovely. Right, all that's left is this top edge. So before we go any further and actually add our Decaville and think about closing this gap up, I'm just going to fold those edges under and give it a little press along this top turning gap edge. And I'll go right the way to the corner because I don't think I've pressed right into the corner here. No, that makes a lovely, lovely difference, that does. It's very satisfying, isn't it? Giving it a nice crisp press. Okay, there we go. Right, that looks lovely. And you've got a little bit of bulk here on the ends of the zip pouch, so feel free to just clip those. That will hopefully flatten that down before you come to top stitch a little bit. Okay, now what I recommend you do is leave this just to sit for a little bit, just to have a think about being flat. Okay, and then we'll come back and add our heavy stabilizer Decaville into there as well, and we'll attach that. Okay, but just to make sure that all of those edges are nice and flat before we even think about adding our stabilizer. Okay, so leave that to cool down and we'll come back and add our stabilizer. Okay, we're ready to insert the Decaville. So unclip your folio if you left it clipped like me. Having a think about its behaviour. Something I do fairly often for bags when I get to a point and I think they just need a break. Okay, and then what we're going to do is glue side up. We're going to slot this through the turning gap into the inside of this bit. Now it's a fairly tight turning gap that I've managed to leave here. If you're watching this before you make it, then you might want to leave a slightly bigger turning gap than I did. Okay, right, so it's in. Now we've just got to flatten it out and make sure it's cut right into the corners. Okay, so where I rolled it to get it in, just unroll it, flatten it out nicely. if you find it's sort of rolling up against the edges, then you might need to give it a little tug just to get it into place. I've got a bit of a funny corner there. Move that into position, that's fine. And then this corner, oh there, that was really ruckled up. Okay. So just smooth it down and make sure it's in the right place. You don't want to fuse it and it not be in the right place. What you can do then is pop your hand in on the other side, the non-glue side, and just have a feel for where it is and whether it needs to move any. That bit needs to move a little bit. Now this will be easier to apply if you apply it before you sew the two layers together, but it won't give you as good a finish. So although it's a bit of a pain, it does give you a better finish to apply it later on. Right, let's tuck that bit under the turning gap there. Make sure it's under my seam allowance so that it's not going to be affected when I close my turning gap. Okay, lovely. And just pull my seam allowance out over the top of it. That's great. And do the same on this side. That's great. Just a little bit of extra time spent now, just give you a much neater finish at the end. I think I've got a little tuck there. There we go. That's better. Right, my turning gap is, well, the seam allowance, my turning gap is folded over my decaville. So just have another little feel of what we've got going on. That all feels good from this side. All feels good from this side. All feels good inside from what I can tell. Now's the magic moment. So what I'm going to do is get my little pressing mat back again, and in key areas like the flap, start with the flap first. I'm going to give that a little press. Oh, hang on, I think I might have caught a ruckle. I can't tell what's going on. Hang on, let's have a look. No, I didn't catch a ruckle. Moment of excitement there. Okay, so in key areas like the flap, I'm going to work on that bit first. So all I'm going to do is from the exterior side, just give it a nice press, and this will adhere the decaville onto my fabric. Okay, so it's a bit long-winded getting it into place, but actually be worth it once it's fused into the right place. Okay, so I'm going to turn that over and just press from this side to make sure that everything's adhered fully and in place where it should be. Okay, lovely. That's great, actually. That's given it a really lovely finish. Okay, and then from this straight end, let's give it a little bit of a press and just fuse that decaville onto our exterior fabric. Just don't melt your snap while you're doing this. Okay, let's have a feel from this side. Feels okay. I thought I had a little lump there, but it's not, it's the snap, of course. That all feels fine. Right, so just fuse this final bit here. And just take a few minutes doing this so it's nice and neat. But it looks fairly plain on the outside, doesn't it? All the exciting bit is on the inside. Okay, lovely. Right, just give that a second to cool down, and then we can have a bit more of a feel, double check everything is fused into place. We are going to top stitch anyway, which will make sure that everything is held in place, just to be sure. Okay, now one last thing before we top stitch, I'm going to add a little line of glue in this turning gap, because although we're going to top stitch it closed, I just think it gives you that little bit of extra security that that gap is sealed closed fully, and it's not just held with that one line of stitching. So I've just done a thin line of glue on the inside there, and then with the folio standing up, I'm just making sure that those seam allowances are matching nicely. Add in a couple of clips just to keep them together. There we go, lovely. Okay. Now, I and a couple of my testers have found that if you're not careful, then on your flap of your exterior, you can have a perfectly centered snap and slightly wonky stitching. So what I would recommend at this point is to mark the center of your flap, because you're going to need to know that for your snap. Okay, you can double check that that lines up with your cam snap. Yeah. Oh gosh, that looks good. I can't wait to finish this now. That's really lovely. Okay, so that's the center there. So that is the point that I'm going to be stitching towards, and I might just draw in the corner or in that point my seam allowance, just to make sure that I am doing as best I can to get a nicely matched pointy flappy bit. Okay, right, so I've got my center marked there. Now what we're going to do is just sew around the entire outside perimeter of this Passport Folio using our top stitch length and an 1/8 of an inch or 3mm seam allowance. Now it's up to you whether you want to stitch on this side, which is the right side, or on this side, which is the wrong side, but you can control what is where and your humps and lumps and things. If you sew on this side, then you will need something like a needle packet, or if you've got a hump jumper, then a hump jumper. Just so that as you get to the point where you're going to sew over these zip tabs, you can pop that in the back of your foot and it will just level out the foot as you sew over it. In fact, 2 needle packets might be better. But let's see how we go. So I'm going to think, where is the least conspicuous place for me to start top stitching? I think it's down here in between those 2 passport pockets. So I'm going to start top stitching there, and let's make sure my threads are nice and long so that I can tie them off afterwards and don't have to back stitch. And I'm going to start my needle down so that I can readjust as I move around. I'm just going to stand up to sew this, I think, so I can have a bit more control over where everything is. Okay. Just take your time sewing this. And as you come to the corner, we'll lift the presser foot and pivot. Okay, and swivel again. And I've gotten to this point and realised I've drawn my seam allowance on the exterior rather than the lining, and I'm sewing on the lining. Let me see if I can do it while my flap is suspended in the air. Okay, can sort of. This would have been easier if I'd drawn it on the right side. Okay. Oh no, and now I've lost my pin. I think that's the centre. Okay. Well, it was a good plan. Poorly executed. Right, hopefully that is the centre and my plan has been worthwhile. Right, so as we come back towards this lumpy bit where the zip pocket or zip end is, just take your time. Get as close as you can and then lift up your presser foot and pop a needle case or two. It might just be one actually. Behind, underneath, yeah. So pop that behind your needle underneath. And I held that in place as I sewed just over that lumpy bit, and now I'm past that point so I can take it away. Okay. Okay. Right, so in theory, that's all lovely and top stitched. Let's double check it before we make any kind of claims though. Looks pretty good. And the turning gap is closed. Lovely. Right, so let's tie off these threads then that we've got. Let's see if we can pull the bottom thread through to the lining side. It's never the easiest thing to do. Navy thread, navy fabric, is it? Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute. There we go, that's one through to this side. Let's try and pull this other one through. There we go. And because I've got 4 threads and they're all very, very, very close together, I'm just going to separate them into 2 lots of 2 and tie them together. All 4 of them together. And actually that can't be seen at all against my fabric. If your thread can be seen against your fabric, then you may wish to consider whether you place those directly next to the start of your passport pocket maybe. Okay, lovely. Right, let's double check then that this does fold up, and that is indeed the centre. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so now what we're going to do is add our second snap, which I have not lost against the odds. I've not lost it, and we're going to pop it through both, well, through all of these layers really. So rather than working on the inside side, even though it's going to be the inside side that snaps, you need to work on the outside side, because this is the side that you're going to see. So we are going to pop this in the centre, and we're going to pop it approximately 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimetres from the edge of the, like the flappy edge, the pointy edge. Okay, so that is the centre as marked by my pin. And I am going to just actually put that pin back in again so that I can line up based on that pin, because as I said earlier, it might be straight, but unless it looks straight, then it will look wonky. Okay. So from what I can tell, that is approximately the centre. And I've just popped my awl through centre, through all of those layers. Give it a bit of a wiggle, make a bit of a hole. Okay, and I'm just going to pop this through to test it. Yeah, so the rounded end should be on the same side as the female side. Okay, so the male side shouldn't be there, it should be on the inside. Okay, so once you're happy that that is in the right place, then add some fray check or a dab of glue, whatever you prefer. Add in a dab of this fast and tacky glue, which seems to do a pretty good job. Okay, we'll pop that through from the right side, and then pop the male half on, and then we need our snaps just to set this and just give it a nice big squeeze to set. Lovely. Okay, so let's double check. We've got our slip pocket, got our zip pouch, yeah, there's no holes in there, got our card slots, got our passport slots and boarding pass slots or document slots, passport slots. And does it match up when you fold it? It does. Now I think that looks great. I think that looks fantastic actually, and I can't wait to take it on holiday somewhere. I think that is perfect for everything you need to carry in the airport. All of your documents, all of your cards, your insurance, bits and bobs. I think that's great, and I hope that you will make one as well and enjoy taking it on holiday. Thank you for joining me. I can't wait to see what you make. If you make one of these passport folios, please do feel free to share it with myself at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H, or with Sew Hot, who have sponsored this fabric, and that's at Sew Hot. We would love to see your finished passport folios. I'd love to see them on holiday. That'd be amazing. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye.